I am the one who recorded it. So let me be the one who tells you the truth before the official versions finish swallowing it whole. My name is Tessik Vaoll. I am an archivist of the Concordance, or I was before everything I'd archived turned out to be a child's drawing of the real world. For 200 of your years I sat in the Great Hall of Records on Meridia and I logged the doings of the galaxy, treaties, trade, the small quiet movements of 40,000 years of peace. It was a good life, a boring life, the best kind. And I was in the chamber the day my people declared war on humanity. I saw their faces, I heard the words, and I saw what the humans did when they heard those words, which was nothing, nothing at all. And I have spent every day since trying to understand how nothing can be the most frightening thing a species has ever done. Let me take you there. Let me make you understand what we threw away. You have to picture Meridia first, because Meridia was the whole point of us. It was not a world. It was a built thing, a vast ring city hung in the light of a gentle yellow star, the diplomatic heart of the galaxy, where every spacefaring species kept an embassy and a voice. 40,000 years we had kept the peace from that ring. 40,000 years. The Concordance, my people, the Vaoll, had been the keepers of it, the neutral hand, the species everyone trusted because we wanted nothing but the records kept clean and the peace kept whole. The air on Meridia was always warm and smelled faintly of the flowering vines the gardeners trained along every corridor, a deliberate thing, that smell, chosen 10,000 years ago because every species in the Concordance found it calming. The light was soft. The great chamber where the assembly met had a ceiling of clear crystal, and above it you could see the slow turning of the stars, and below it sat the representatives of 200 species, and for 40,000 years almost nothing terrible had ever happened in that room. Humanity had been part of the Concordance for 30,000 of those years. I want you to sit with that number, because most of the galaxy had forgotten it, and forgetting it was the mistake that nearly ended us. 30,000 years. The humans had come up out of their hard little world and crossed the dark and joined the peace, and they had been good members. Quiet, helpful, they built, they traded. They sent doctors to plagues and engineers to disasters, and they never, not once in 30,000 years, raised a hand against anyone. Over that span of time, a species becomes part of the furniture. You stop seeing them. The humans were just there, the ones who were always there, the ones who'd always been there. The galaxy had a comfortable little story about them, gentle, clever, harmless, soft. And we told ourselves that story for so long that we forgot we had never actually tested whether it was true. The Thren did not forget. The Thren never forgot anything, and they never forgave anything, and that was their whole trouble. The Thren were knew the way humanity had once been new, a hard, hungry species that had clawed its way up out of a brutal world and come into the galaxy fast and angry, looking at 40,000 years of peace, and seeing not an achievement but an opportunity. They had spent 2 centuries building the largest war fleet the galaxy had seen in living memory. 10,000 warships, weapons that could crack a planet's crust. An army bred and trained and convinced, all the way down, that the soft old species of the Concordance were rotten fruit waiting to be taken, and that the softest, oldest, most rotten of all were the humans, who hadn't fired a weapon in 30,000 years and had surely forgotten how. The Thren ambassador's name was Coroth Vane. I logged his entrance that day, the way I logged everything. He came into the great chamber under the crystal ceiling with 40 of his honor guard, armed, which was itself a violation. You did not bring weapons into the assembly. You hadn't for 40,000 years, and nobody stopped him, because nobody could quite believe he meant it. He walked to the center of the floor, to the speaking circle, and he stood there in his black war armor among the soft robes of 200 peaceful species, and he smiled the way a predator smiles. And he declared war. Not on the Concordance. He was cleverer than that. He declared war on humanity, specifically, alone, and he did it as a kind of demonstration, a thing to be watched. He stood in the speaking circle, and he told the assembled galaxy that the age of soft peace was over, that the Thren were taking what the weak could no longer hold, and that he would begin with the humans, because the humans were the oldest and softest of all, and breaking them would show every other species exactly what was coming. 30,000 years, he said, and his voice carried up into the crystal dome. 30,000 years since your kind last made war. You have forgotten how. You have become farmers and doctors and clerks. You have grown soft in the long peace, and the long peace is over. He turned slowly, addressing the whole chamber, playing to it. We will start with Saul. We will start with your homeworld, your cradle, your Earth. In 30 days our fleet will arrive at your home system, and we will show this assembly what becomes of a species that forgets how to fight. Surrender it now, and we will be merciful. Resist, and we will not. Then he stopped, and he looked at the human delegation, and so did everyone else. The whole chamber turned to look at the humans, 200 species holding their breath, waiting to see the soft, old, gentle race tremble. There were 3 humans in the delegation that day. I had logged them in that morning. Their lead was an old woman named Ambassador Mara Akanjo, silver-haired, small, the kind of human who'd held the seat for so long that most of us thought of her as part of the room itself. She'd been ambassador to the Concordance for 60 years. I'd shared 1,000 quiet conversations with her in the archive corridors. She liked the flowering vines. She always asked after my work. She did not tremble. She sat in her seat under the crystal dome, with the war-armored ambassador of the largest fleet in the galaxy promising to burn her homeworld in 30 days, and she did not move, and she did not pale, and her old face did not change at all. The 2 humans beside her didn't move either. The 3 of them just sat there, calm, still, watching Koroth Vain the way you'd watch a child having a tantrum in a corner, not with fear, not even really with anger, but with a kind of patient, terrible attention. The silence stretched out. It went on too long. The chamber began to feel it. And then Ambassador Akanjo did the thing that I have replayed in my mind every single day since. She didn't stand. She didn't make a speech. She reached into the folds of her robe slowly, and she took out a small, worn data slate, an old one, scratched, the kind humans carried for personal notes, and she looked down at it, and she made a single mark on it with her finger. One mark. Like she was crossing something off a list. Like she was checking a box she'd drawn there a long, long time ago. And then she looked up at Koroth Vain, and she smiled, gently, almost kindly, the way you smile at someone who has just made a mistake they don't yet understand, and she said 5 words. She said, "We were hoping you wouldn't." That was all. We were hoping you wouldn't. And she put the slate away, and she folded her hands, and she went back to waiting, calm as still water, while the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy promised to murder her world. I didn't understand it then. None of us did. The Thren certainly didn't. Koroth Vain actually laughed, a hard barking laugh, because to him that quiet little non-response was proof of everything he'd said, proof that the humans were broken and soft and finished. But I was the archivist. I was the one who kept the records. And that night, alone in the Hall of Records, I did something I had never done in 200 years of service. I broke a seal. I went into the deepest, oldest, most restricted part of the human archive, the part nobody ever looked at, the 30,000-year file, the one labeled in a human script so old even our translators struggled with it, because something about that old woman's calm had put a cold weight in my chest, and I needed to know what she'd crossed off her list. What I found in that file is the reason I'm telling you this. It's the reason none of us slept again. And it begins with a single line, written by a human hand 30,000 years ago, on the day they first joined the peace. The line read, "They will forget what we are. We must never forget what we were." I read the whole file that night, all 30,000 years of it. It took until Meridia's artificial dawn, and when the soft light came up through the crystal and touched the flowering vines, I was a different person than I'd been when the dark began. I want to tell you what I learned, but I have to tell it the way it came to me, because the order matters. The order is the horror of it. The file did not begin with weapons. That's the first thing. I'd expected weapons. I'd expected secret fleets, hidden bases, doomsday machines buried in dead moons. There was some of that much later, but the file began with a decision. 30,000 years ago, when humanity first came to the Concordance, they were not soft. They came from a world that had spent 4 billion years trying to kill them, and they had won. The way you win a fight like that, by becoming the most dangerous thing on the planet, by outthinking and out-enduring and out-killing everything that ever came for them. They arrived in the galaxy still bloody, still hard, still carrying the scars of 1,000 wars they'd fought against each other. And they looked at the long peace of the Concordance, the 40,000 years of it, the gentle ring city and the flowering vines and the 200 species who'd forgotten what war even was, and they made a choice that no species before them had ever made. They chose to put it down. Not to forget it. That's the part the galaxy got wrong, the part that nearly killed us all. The other old species had become gentle by forgetting, by letting the long peace wash the violence out of them generation by generation until they truly could not fight anymore, until the capacity was just gone. The humans watched that happen to their neighbors, and they understood something about it that no one else did. They understood that a species which forgets how to fight doesn't become peaceful. It becomes prey. It just hasn't met its predator yet. So humanity made a different bargain with itself. It would live in peace. It would build and heal and trade and never raise a hand. It would be the gentlest member of the Concordance for as long as the peace held, but it would not forget. Somewhere in some quiet, disciplined corner of itself, it would keep the old knowledge alive, not to use it, but to have it, so that on the day a predator finally came, humanity would be the one species in the galaxy that hadn't let itself become prey. That was the line I'd found. They will forget what we are. We must never forget what we were. And then this is the part that kept me reading until dawn with my hands cold. They did it. For 30,000 years, they actually did it. The file was a record of discipline on a scale my mind could barely hold. Every generation of humans for 30,000 years had quietly maintained the old knowledge. Not openly, not in any way the galaxy could see. They kept it folded into things that looked harmless. Their art, their games. Their stories. Humans never stopped telling stories about war, and we'd all thought it was a charming primitive habit, a species working through old traumas, when in fact it was a transmission system, a way of passing the hard truths down the generations dressed up as entertainment so the knowledge never died. Their physical cultures, their strange insistence on competition, on testing themselves, on doing difficult, pointless things just to stay sharp. We'd watched humans climb mountains and cross oceans and push their soft bodies to brutal limits for no reason any of us could see, and we'd thought it was quaint. It wasn't quaint. It was maintenance. A whole species refusing to go soft, century after century, while wearing the face of the gentlest people in the galaxy. And underneath the culture, in the deep restricted layers of the file, there was the other thing, the thing they'd built and never used. I won't pretend I understood all of it. I'm an archivist, not an engineer, but I understood enough to know that for 30,000 years, while the galaxy thought humanity was building hospitals and trade ships, humanity had also been building something else, quietly, slowly, distributed across 1,000 worlds and 10,000 hidden places, never tested in anger, never shown to anyone, waiting. Not a fleet exactly. Something stranger and more patient than a fleet. A capacity. A readiness folded into the bones of human civilization, so deeply that you could not have found it if you'd taken the species apart, because it wasn't in any one place. It was in all of them, in every human alive. 30,000 years of a species keeping itself ready for a war it prayed would never come, and telling no one, and asking no thanks, and hoping with everything it had that the readiness would simply rot away unused. That was what Ambassador Akanjo had crossed off her list. I understood it now. Somewhere in the human archive there was a list 30,000 years old, and at the top of it was a single grim line, "The day someone declares war on us," and that line had a small box beside it, and for 30,000 years that box had stayed empty, and the humans had hoped, generation after generation, that it always would. Concordance had checked it for them. "We were hoping you wouldn't." I sat in the hall of records as the dawn came up, and I thought about the gentle old woman who liked the flowering vines and always asked after my work, and I understood for the first time that I had never once, in 60 years, seen what she actually was. None of us had. We'd seen the face humanity wore. We'd never seen the 30,000 years of iron underneath it. And I was filled with a fear so total and so cold that I did something an archivist is never supposed to do. I left my post. I ran through the corridors of Meridia in the early light, past the sleeping embassies, to find someone, anyone in the Concordance leadership, to tell them what I now knew. To tell them, "We have made a terrible mistake. The Thren have made a terrible mistake. We did not declare war on a soft old species that forgot how to fight. We declared war on the only species in the galaxy that never let itself forget. And it has been waiting 30,000 years, hoping we would never be foolish enough to make it remember." Out beyond Meridia, in the cold dark between the stars, the Thren fleet was already moving. 10,000 warships, the largest war fleet in living memory, crewed by a species that had bred itself for exactly this, that had spent 2 centuries convincing itself the old galaxy was rotten fruit. They formed up at their staging worlds and they turned toward Sol, toward Earth, toward the human cradle, and they began the 30-day march that Concordance had promised the Assembly. They broadcast it too. That was the arrogance of them. They wanted it watched. They opened channels to the whole galaxy so that every species could see the soft old humans broken, could see the long peace ended, could learn the lesson the Thren meant to teach, that the strong take and the weak are taken, and 40,000 years of peace was just 40,000 years of prey forgetting to be afraid. The humans watched the fleet come. Of course they did. They saw it the moment it moved, and they did again nothing. No counterfleet rushed to meet it. No desperate evacuation of Earth began. No panic diplomacy, no pleading to the Concordance for protection, no scramble of defenses. The human worlds went about their business. The trade ships kept trading. The doctors kept healing. Ambassador Akanjo stayed in her seat on Meridia, calm as still water, and when the other species came to her in fear and asked what humanity would do, she gave them all the same answer, the same gentle, terrible, patient answer. She said, "We'll handle it, please don't worry, and please stay out of the Sol system for the next month. We don't want anyone getting hurt who doesn't have to. We don't want anyone getting hurt who doesn't have to." I logged that sentence in the official record. My hands were not steady when I did it, because I had read the file and I knew what that sentence actually meant, and it was not the reassurance everyone took it for. It was a warning. The gentlest species in the galaxy was telling its friends to step back, not because it was afraid of what the Thren would do to Earth, but because it was afraid of what Earth was about to do to the Thren. The whole galaxy watched the Thren fleet reach the Sol system. They'd made sure of it. 200 species, gathered around their screens on 1,000 worlds, watching the largest war fleet in living memory fall on the soft old human cradle. I watched from the Hall of Records on Meridia, with Ambassador Akanjo 3 corridors away sitting calm in her quarters, and I think my hearts did not beat properly for the entire thing. The Thren came in expecting a slaughter, and for the first few hours it looked like they might get one, because there was nothing there to stop them. That's the truth. When the fleet crossed into the Sol system, Earth's defenses did not light up. There was no wall of warships, no orbital fortress, no desperate last stand. The human world's Earth, the Mars colonies, the stations in the belt, the moons of the gas giants just sat there in the light of their yellow sun, quiet lights on, going about their lives. Concordance broadcast his triumph to the watching galaxy. "You see," he said, 30,000 years of softness. They cannot even defend their own cradle. Watch now and learn. He ordered the fleet to take orbit over Earth. He ordered his weapons charged. He gave humanity one last chance to surrender its homeworld broadcast wide so everyone could hear the humans beg. The humans did not beg. Instead, a single human voice came onto the channel, calm, unhurried, an old woman's voice, and with a small cold shock I realized it was Archangel herself, speaking from her quarters on Meridia, patched through to the whole watching galaxy. She wasn't on Earth. She didn't need to be. She spoke to Concordance Vaoll across the light years as easily as if he were in the next room. Ambassador Vaoll, she said, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want the whole assembly to hear me ask. Turn your fleet around. Go home. No one has to die today, not your people, not mine. 30,000 years we've kept this door closed. You don't want to know what's on the other side of it. I'm begging you, not because I'm afraid. Because I'm not, and that should frighten you more than anything I could threaten. A pause. Turn around, please. Concordance Vaoll laughed at her, and he gave the order to fire on Earth. And that exact moment, the order to fire on the human cradle, was the moment the box got crossed off for real. Not the declaration. The first shot. 30,000 years of restraint had a single tripwire built into it, one line that could not be uncrossed, and the Thren had just stepped on it in front of the entire galaxy. What happened next took about 11 minutes. I have watched the recording of those 11 minutes more times than I can count, and I still don't have words equal to it. I'll do my best. The Thren weapons fired on Earth and stopped, mid-beam. The energy simply ceased, blinked out, as though someone had reached into 10,000 warships at once and quietly turned them off. Because someone had. This was the first thing humanity revealed, and it was not a weapon at all, not in the way the Thren understood weapons. For 30,000 years, while the galaxy thought humans were just clever traders, humanity had been the ones who built and serviced and understood the deep systems that everyone's ships ran on, the drives, the reactors, the control architectures. Humans were everywhere, humble, helpful, the engineers nobody noticed. And somewhere in 30,000 years of being the species that quietly understood how everything worked, they had made certain that nothing in the galaxy could fire on a human world without humanity being able to reach in and say no. The Thren fleet went dark, weapons cold. Then the drives. 10,000 warships hung dead in orbit over Earth, helpless, drifting, their crews staring at consoles that had stopped answering, and the watching galaxy made a single collective sound that I felt through the floor of the Hall of Records, even across the light years. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that mattered, the thing that made me weep where I sat. Humanity could have ended them right there. 10,000 ships, dead in the water, every Thren soul aboard at their mercy. 30,000 years of held-back violence, and a clear shot, and the whole galaxy watching, and every reason in creation to make an example so terrible no one would ever try again. They didn't. Instead, the human voice came back. Archangel, still calm, but I could hear it now, the thing underneath, not rage, grief. The grief of someone forced to open a door they'd kept closed for 30,000 years. Your fleet is mine now, she said. Every ship. I can hold them or I can let them fall into your sun, and I want you to understand that the second one would take me about as long as the first. You're not a fleet anymore, Ambassador. You're 10,000 coffins that haven't closed yet, and the only hand on the lid is mine. A pause. And I'm not going to close it. You could hear Concordance Vaoll breathing on the channel. Nothing else, just that. I'm not going to close it, Archangel said again, because 30,000 years ago my ancestors made a promise. Not to you, to themselves. They promised they would never become what your people are right now, a species that takes because it can, that mistakes cruelty for strength. We kept the old knowledge alive for 30,000 years for one reason and one reason only, so that on the day a predator came we could stop it without becoming it. Her voice didn't rise. It never rose. That was the terrible part. You came here to teach the galaxy a lesson about strength, Fine, here's the lesson. The strongest thing in this system right now is the hand that's choosing not to kill you. Remember that. Teach it to your children. Because we are going to let you live, all 10,000 ships of you, and we are going to send you home. And the price, the only price, is that you go home and you tell the truth. You tell them you came to break the soft old humans, and you found out what we really are. And what we really are is the species that had every reason to destroy you and chose not to. And then, one by one, the Thren drives came back on. Just the drives. Not the weapons, those stayed cold. And I learned later they stayed cold for a long, long time, because humanity had decided the Thren could find their own way back to fighting, and humanity was in no hurry to hand it to them. The fleet, powerless to do anything but obey, turned around in orbit over the world it had come to burn, and began the long, humiliated journey home. 10,000 warships full of the galaxy's most feared soldiers, weeping or silent or staring at nothing. Every one of them alive because an old woman 3 light years away had decided that mercy was the harder, and therefore the truer kind of strength. The galaxy watched all of it. That was humanity's real weapon in the end. Not the thing that turned off the fleet. The thing they did after. 200 species had tuned in to watch the soft old humans get broken, and instead they watched the soft old humans hold 10,000 enemy ships in the palm of one hand and open the hand. Let them go. Choose, in front of everyone in the clearest possible terms, not to be the monster they just defeated. You cannot frighten a galaxy into respecting you. The Thren had tried that, and it had ended with their fleet limping home in disgrace. But you can do something the Thren never understood was even possible. You can show a galaxy, in 11 minutes watched by everyone, that the most dangerous species alive is also the most restrained, that the hand which could crush them is choosing, deliberately, gently, to hold them instead. And in that moment, every species watching understood something about humanity that 30,000 years of quiet helpfulness had never quite taught us. We had never been safe because humanity was soft. We had been safe because humanity was strong, and had decided, a very long time ago, to be kind about it. I sat in the Hall of Records as the Thren fleet crawled home across the dark, and I thought about the line in the file, the 30,000-year-old line written by a human hand on the day they first chose to put their violence down. They will forget what we are. We must never forget what we were. And I understood finally all the way down what it had cost them. 30,000 years of being underestimated. 30,000 years of being called soft, quaint, harmless, finished. 30,000 years of holding the most dangerous thing in the galaxy folded up quiet inside themselves and never once letting it out. Never once correcting us. Never once saying you have no idea what we are because the whole point, the entire 30,000-year point, was to never have to. And when the day finally came that they had no choice, they still found a way to put the door closed again as gently as they could. But the galaxy had seen now. The door had opened just for 11 minutes, just wide enough. And nothing, for the Thren, for the Concordance, for me, for any of us, was ever going to be the same. The Thren fleet took 2 months to crawl home. Nobody helped them. Nobody attacked them either. The Concordance had no stomach for kicking a beaten thing, and besides, the whole galaxy understood by then that the humans were watching, and that the humans had asked everyone to let the Thren go in peace. So 10,000 crippled warships limped back across the dark, and the galaxy let them pass, and at every world they passed, the people came out to look at them the way you look at a storm that almost hit you and didn't. Korath Vane did not survive the journey home. Not by anyone's hand. The Thren are a proud people, and pride that has been broken in front of the entire galaxy is a hard thing to carry, and he did not carry it. I won't say more than that. I logged it in the record, and I felt no satisfaction in it, which surprised me, because I'd hated him those first few days. But by the time the news came, I'd read the file, and I understood that humanity hadn't wanted this either. Hadn't wanted his death any more than they'd wanted the deaths of his crews. The whole thing was a tragedy the humans had spent 30,000 years trying to prevent, and failing to prevent only because a single proud creature couldn't imagine that the soft old species might be telling the truth. What changed in the galaxy after, that's the part that took years to understand, and I had a front row seat to all of it, because I went on keeping the records, and the records after the Thren War read very differently than the records before it. The first thing that changed was small and strange. The other species stopped underestimating each other. Not just the humans, everyone. For 40,000 years, the Concordance had run on a quiet assumption that the old gentle species were gentle because they were weak, and the new hard species were dangerous because they were strong, and that the whole game was about managing the strong and protecting the weak. Humanity broke that. Humanity had shown the whole galaxy, in 11 watched minutes, that gentleness and strength were not opposites at all, that the gentlest hand in the room might be the only one strong enough to choose gentleness, and that you had no way of knowing from the outside which was which. So everyone got a little more careful, a little more humble. The galaxy became, very slowly, a kinder place, not because anyone got softer, but because nobody could be sure anymore who was hiding what under their robes. The second thing that changed was the humans themselves, and this is the part I find hardest to talk about, because I knew Ambassador Akanjo, and I watched it happen to her. They grieved. The whole species grieved. I don't think the galaxy expected that. I certainly didn't. They had won. They defended their cradle, sent the largest fleet in living memory home in disgrace, and earned the wary respect of 200 species, all without losing a single human life. By any measure the galaxy understood, it was a flawless victory, and the humans walked through it like people at a funeral. I asked Akanjo about it once, much later, in the archive corridors, where she still came to sit among the flowering vines. She was older by then. The years after the war had put more silver in her hair and more weight behind her eyes. She thought about my question for a long time before she answered. 30,000 years, she said finally. We kept that door shut. Do you understand what that is? 1,500 generations of human beings, every single one of them, choosing not to be the monster. Choosing it on faith, most of them, they never saw a war, never faced a predator, just kept the discipline alive and passed it down, and trusted that the choosing mattered even though nothing ever came to test it. 1,500 generations of restraint, Tessik, with no reward, no proof it was worth it, just the promise. We must never forget what we were. She looked at the vines. And then one proud fool made us open the door, and we found out the discipline had held that we could open it and still close it again, still choose mercy with 10,000 enemies in our hand. We passed the test. Then why grieve? I asked. You passed. You proved everything your ancestors hoped. Because the door is open now, she said quietly. And it doesn't close all the way anymore. For 30,000 years the galaxy didn't know what we were, and that meant we didn't have to know either, not really, not day to day. We got to just be the doctors and the traders and the engineers, the helpful, gentle people who climbed mountains for no reason. We got to forget, a little in the only way that was safe, not forgetting the knowledge, but forgetting the weight of it. Forgetting that we were the most dangerous thing in the room. And now everyone knows. Now they look at us differently. They're polite and they're careful and they're a little bit afraid, and they will be forever, and we did that to ourselves the moment we showed them. We can never go back to being underestimated. She smiled, sad and tired. Do you know how restful it is to be underestimated, to have everyone think you're harmless? It's the closest thing to peace a dangerous creature ever gets, and we gave it up. We had to. But we gave it up, and we're never getting it back, and that's worth grieving. I have thought about that conversation for the rest of my life. Because I understood, finally, the real cost of what humanity had done, not in the 11 minutes over Earth, but in the 30,000 years before and the thousands of years since. They had carried a terrible power so quietly, for so long, that the carrying had become a kind of grace. They'd let the whole galaxy think they were soft, and they'd taken the insult of it, the dismissal, the condescension, century after century, and they'd never once corrected us, because being thought harmless was a gift they could give the galaxy and themselves, a way of letting everyone, including their own children, live as though the predator at the table were just another gentle guest. And the day they finally had to show their teeth, the thing they mourned was not the lives lost. It was the lie they could no longer tell. The kind lie, the lie that had let everyone sleep. I am very old now, for a Vaoll. I have kept the records of the Concordance for 200 more years since that day, and I have watched the galaxy slowly make its peace with what humanity is. The Thren, what's left of them, are a quiet and chastened people now. Some of the best peace workers in the Concordance are Thren, which I think humanity finds quietly satisfying, though they'd never say so. And the humans are still here, still gentle, still helpful, still climbing their mountains for no reason anyone can see, except now we all know the reason and we don't call it quaint anymore. I asked to be the one to seal the file again when the inquiries were finished. They let me. And before I sealed it, I added one line to the bottom of it after 30,000 years of human entries, the first and only thing a Vaoll ever wrote in that archive. I don't know if anyone will ever read it, but I needed it there. I wrote, "We thought peace was the absence of danger. They taught us it was danger, choosing to be gentle. We were children. They let us stay children for 30,000 years, and the day we forced them to grow us up, they did it as kindly as they could." That's the whole story. That's what really happened before the official version smoothed it down into something easier to hold. After 30,000 years of peace, the aliens declared war on humanity, and humanity didn't even blink. Not because they didn't care, but because they'd been ready and grieving the readiness, since before any of the rest of us learned to be afraid of the dark. Look twice at the gentle ones. That's the only lesson I have after 200 years of keeping the records. The loud and the armored and the proud, those you can measure. It's the quiet ones, the helpful ones, the ones who have been kind so long you've forgotten to wonder why they can afford to be. Those are the ones who have chosen it. And a creature that chooses gentleness, when it could choose anything at all, is the strongest thing you will ever meet. I hope you never have to find that out the way the Thren did. But if a gentle thing ever tells you quietly that it was hoping you wouldn't believe it, and turn around and go home.